Hi, Jessica Nadav bringing you this week's Davar Torah for Parashat Beha'alotecha. Now, I'd like to dedicate this Davar Torah for anyone who needs a refuah shlema, speedy recovery, and for all our brave chayalim and chayalot in Israel. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should protect them all. Now, firstly, I should say that Chutz La'aretz, outside of Israel, we're out of sync with Israel. Why? Because Shavuot, which this year fell on Friday and Shabbat, outside of Israel was 2 days long, and in Israel was 1 day. So on the second day of Shavuot, Israel was already reading the Parasha of Naso, which we would only read last week. So we're a week out. Okay, so my apologies to my Israeli audience, but I hope you'll learn something anyway. So this week's Parasha, as I said, in Chutz La'aretz, outside of Israel, is Parashat Beha'alotecha, which literally means when you raise up. And it talks to us about a number of topics. There are many, many topics in this week's Parasha. But amongst them, there are the commandments to Aharon to light up the menorah on a daily basis, the initiation of the Levites, of the Leviim, Pesach Sheni, which we've spoken about before. So for anybody who's interested, go and refer to my video on Parashat Emor. And the complaints of Bnei Israel, the complaints of the people about the food that they were missing from Egypt. And there's other topics which I'm not going to go into. Let's focus today on the people's complaints and Moshe's reaction to them. Now you'll recall that we came out of Egypt in a blaze of open miracles, and we received man from heaven, and we received water, and no sooner had Bnei Israel started traveling than they start complaining. First they complain about the arduous journey. Then they complain about the man, the food from heaven, saying, and I'll quote, "Who will feed us meat? We remember the fish that we would eat in Egypt, free of charge, the cucumbers and the melons, the leeks, the onions and the garlic. But now our life is parched. There is nothing. We have nothing before our eyes but man." Now, of course they had meat. We know they had meat. They came out of Egypt with flocks and cattle. We know they had meat. So they're only really looking for a pretext to complain, right? Now Moshe hears the people crying, and he asks Hashem in very strong terms, very strong language is used here, why he's been lumbered with such a people. He says he cannot carry this entire nation on his own anymore. It's too heavy for him. It's too much of a burden. Note, he's never yet once complained about the people. On the contrary, every single time he's stood up for them. Every time Bnei Israel sinned or they did something wrong, he stood up for them. So what does Hashem do? He answers by saying, he advises Moshe Rabbeinu to gather 70 elders who will assist him in his leadership role, in his leadership duties, and carry the burden with him. Now these elders will be infused or gifted with the power of prophecy too. And here again we see the mark of a true leader. Moshe isn't threatened or diminished somehow by people having the same power as him. All he wants is to achieve the aim of serving the Almighty. And compare that to the world we live today, right? Where everyone's protecting their own corner, they're protecting their own power, they're protecting their own interests. Moshe Rabbeinu has nothing to prove. All he wants is the best for his people and to get the job done correctly and properly. And if that means sharing power, so be it. He's fine with that. Now, as I said before, there's a lot to talk about in this week's parasha. I don't want to make this too long. So for today's purpose, we're going to focus very strictly on this. Moshe's uncharacteristic reaction to the people's complaints. And as I said before, and I can't stress it enough, his reaction and his words are really, really very strong. But we remember the Moshe Rabbeinu of Shemot, of the book of Shemot, the book of Exodus, who consistently defends Bnei Israel when they sin. And yet now his attitude appears to be the opposite. He would rather die than continue to serve them as their leader. Now, is it not ironic that after the incident of the Chet HaEgel, of the sin of the golden calf, Moshe is willing to die in order to save his nation, and yet now he'd rather die than lead them? In the book of Shemot, the book of Exodus, Moshe was always sticking his neck out to defend Bnei Israel. And yet now he seems to have given up. In inverted commas, I'm going to say in inverted commas, okay? He seems to have given up. How is it possible the greatest leader of all time, who took Bnei Israel out of Egypt, who led them faithfully to Sinai, to Har Sinai, to receive the Torah, who met face to face almost with HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself, as close to face as any human being could ever get to. How is this person giving up on his people? Now, one could suggest that the contrast between Moshe Rabbeinu's reaction to the Chet HaEgel, to the sin of the golden calf, and his reaction to the complaints about food stems from the motive behind each sin. Despite the severity of the sin of the golden calf, Bnei Israel's sin was the result of a misguided notion or a misguided desire to fill the vacuum of Moshe's absence when he went up to Mount Sinai, and their perceived lateness at his return. In contrast here, what we have is a sin of that is physical in nature. It complains about food. The sin of the golden calf presents an educational challenge to Moshe Rabbeinu, one that he's willing to accept. He's willing to take this misguided desire and channel it correctly, channel it into the proper direction. But after a lustful sin of gluttony, Moshe Rabbeinu simply gives up. He simply cannot comprehend how a nation, how a people who have experienced, who have witnessed, who have evidenced everything they've seen, they've been witnesses to amazing open miracles. After spending an entire year at Har Sinai, at Mount Sinai, how they've become so preoccupied with such mundane desires. Moshe simply doesn't have the educational tools to deal with this low level of behavior. After spending 6 months in such close proximity with the Almighty at Sinai, Moshe Rabbeinu is on a different spiritual level. He's much, much higher than the rest of the nation. It's not that he's incapable of leading the nation. Rather than the nation is too low a level to benefit from his leadership. And at this point he despairs. He seems to despair and he speaks to God with blazing honesty. And what's amazing is that Hashem doesn't respond to him by saying, pull yourself together, or cheer up already. Instead, he gives Moshe Rabbeinu something practical to do, to gather the elders. It's as though he's reminding Moshe Rabbeinu of what his father-in-law Yitro told him to do, to try not to lead alone. He reminds him that even the greatest leaders need friends, they need associates. What's amazing is that Hashem speaks to Moshe Rabbeinu as a friend, and this is fundamental to Judaism. Hashem is not just our creator, the creator of the universe. He's also our father. He's our closest confidant and our closest friend. And we must never forget that. Importantly, by the way, we're also being taught in this week's parasha that at times the worth of the leader cannot be gauged by the effects he has on his people, on the people he's leading. Sometimes the greatest leader may not be the right leader or the best leader for that particular group of people. The matter to think on is whether the leader makes the people or the people deserve the leader they get. And that's a subject that's particularly pertinent for this day and age. Shabbat Shalom from the Kol Megadim team.